Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about guilt and empathy. And I want to share a little background about guilt. So, when I was in my first graduate program, I was in the Boston area. This was back in the 90s. And if you are familiar at all with the Boston neck of the woods, there's a lot of Catholic people there. There's a big Catholic subculture. And it was really funny because at that time, this band, I think it was a local band, came out and they called themselves Big Catholic Guilt. And so, as you can imagine, they got quite famous locally. I don't know if the music was any good, but they got famous mainly from their name because a lot of us related to that, whether we were Catholic or Jewish, because there were also there's a big Jewish subculture, especially at the university where I attended graduate school. And so we all really appreciated that title, Big Catholic Guilt. So today we're going to talk about maybe what I should call big toxic guilt. And let's talk about it. Guilt can be productive, of course, if that guilt is reasonable and it is there to help fuel us to make amends for something that we did. That is good guilt. That is healthy guilt. But most guilt that I see as a therapist is not productive. It is not healthy. It is big, toxic guilt. And it works a lot like shame, ironically. So, emotion, if you look at that word, most of it is composed of the word motion. That's because emotions want to move us towards health in some way. And guilt, if it's healthy, will move us to do something healthy, like make amends for something that we did wrong. But big toxic guilt doesn't move us forward. It's exactly like shame in that it is absolutely debilitating and it makes us stuck. And I find that the people, ironically, with the most guilt are also the most empathic people. They are people that I would say are on the codependent spectrum. And most likely, listener, if you're listening to this right now, like you are probably also on the codependent spectrum. So let's talk about the relationship between guilt and empathy. Empathy is rare in this world, and I have to say it is a precious gift to feel empathy towards another human being. I wish that everyone on the face of this planet had that gift. We would all be better for it. However, codependents have tons of empathy for everyone else, but they rarely have any empathy for themselves, and that is problematic. On the other hand, people who are borderline personality disorder, what I call BPD, they have lots of empathy for themselves and usually only for themselves. But the goal is to be in the healthy middle where we have empathy for ourselves and for others. And the other goal is to foster only healthy, only for people who will benefit from it, not have empathy for people who will abuse our empathy. Because you remember, borderline personality disorder people, BPDs, will abuse others' empathy because they only want to have empathy for themselves and they only want to chronically see themselves as a helpless victim, and they don't want to take responsibility or own their own contribution to the problems that they're experiencing. So we don't want to foster empathy for them because they're going to abuse that empathy. So empathy is not always a gift, is it? Most of my clients are codependents who have been conditioned to have lots of empathy for people who are BPD because they have one or two parents who are BPD. These codependents often suffer severe anxiety because they are chronically betraying themselves by empathizing for people that they should not be empathizing for and not having empathy for themselves. And I have found the greatest obstacle to ending this dysfunctional pattern is the guilt. So that's where the guilt comes into play. I tell these clients that their empathy is a gift, but it is also a double-edged sword and needs to be learned how to be wielded properly. Here's where I believe our empathy originates from. I believe our empathy originates from our own experience of suffering, especially early in life, especially in our early childhood. And that suffering can create in us a heart of empathy towards others that is so beautiful, but it is also dangerous, because if that suffering is outside of our own consciousness, and a lot of us have learned to dissociate from that pain and that suffering of our early childhood, then it's unconscious. And what we do is when we see someone else who is suffering, we find ourselves identifying with them. And when we identify with them, we're not able to distinguish between our suffering and theirs. And we aren't able to really distinguish the differences between our own experience of suffering as a young child and between them and who they are. So when this happens, we overlook the fact that the suffering of that person that we are empathizing for is often the natural outcome of their many, many choices. This is in contrast with our experience of suffering as a child at the hand of the parent who refused to show empathy for us. So, in other words, the child's suffering is 100% unnecessary and avoidable, and was the result of the parent's selfishness, while the parent's suffering is often 100% the result of their own hard-heartedness. So it's really important for us to be conscious of all this so we can distinguish and so we can have boundaries around our empathy. Also, codependents don't realize oftentimes that empathy can and does enable, or that suffering actually can provide a person with a great opportunity to wake up and to start taking ownership of their own behavior and stop seeing themselves as a helpless victim. In other words, empathy can be a gift, but not when given to the wrong person. So this brings us back to the guilt that codependents often feel. Guilt, like shame, lives in the gut, and it severs our relationship with ourselves because our essence, our core self, also lives in the gut. Just like with shame, we need to dislodge big toxic guilt by going back to the imprinting memory or memories where we first were conditioned to feel that guilt. And we need to give that guilt back to the person who gave it to us to begin with, who is usually our parent. And that is the person who should be feeling the guilt, not us. So if you are relating to any of this right now, dear listener, I have an exercise for you, and I would like to lead you in that exercise right now. So listen up, and I hope you're in a place where you can really focus, not driving your car. I would like to encourage you to close your eyes. And I want you to think of the most recent time that you have found yourself moved by empathy. And I want you to imagine you're there where you're hearing someone or seeing someone suffer or hearing them share with you about something that was very painful for them. I want you to imagine that you're hearing that or seeing that right now. And I want you to focus on what you feel in your body, especially on your gut, but really focus on all those sensations. And as you feel them, I want you to focus on those sensations. Keep your eyes closed and let your mind float back to the first time you ever felt the same sensation or sensations in your body. The very earliest memory. When you arrive at this memory, I want you to picture yourself at the age you were. I want you to imagine that you go to your young self and get down on her level and look her in the eyes and say, and I'm going to insert my own name here, but of course, this is for you, dear listener, to insert your name. And you say to her, I see you, little Bronwyn. I know how guilty you feel when you see, fill in the blank, our mother crying like this with no one to comfort her. I see how you identify with her suffering because you also feel alone and sad much of the time. And I see how moved you are right now to wrap your arms around her and comfort her. But I need you, little Bronwyn, to see what I see and know what I know, which is the fact that our mother's loneliness is a natural consequence of her choice to be cruel to the people around her. And I need you to see that the loneliness you feel is not an outcome of your choices at all, but rather of our mother's choice to withhold attunement from you. The guilt you feel doesn't belong to you, but to her. So we're going to put it all in this big cardboard box right now, and we're going to give it back to her and return to owner. We're going to say, hey, Mom, this is yours, not ours. And we're realizing that it never was ours to begin with. So I'm going to return it to owner. Here you go. Do with it what you will. Then you imagine taking your little self by the hand and walking her out of there and say, come on, little Bronwyn, let's get the hell out of here. This is not a safe place for a precious little girl like you. And you walk her out that front door, you close it firmly behind you, and you look her in the eyes and you say, here we are in the light of day where everything is clear and we have each other now. And you know, little Bronwyn, when I look at you, I see a precious little girl and I am so pleased with you. I see the good, bad, and the ugly, but it's a net good that I see. And little Bronwyn, I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to rescue you. I had no idea how much you needed me or how important I am to you. But I'm waking up to it right now, and I will not abandon you again. I am here now to nurture you, to protect you, to advocate for you, and to share your feelings with you so you don't have to feel anything else ever in isolation. What's shareable is bearable, and we're going to feel those feelings together so they don't overwhelm us. And I'm going to validate your feelings because they are valid and they matter to me because you matter to me. And I'm going to be the one meeting your needs from here on out. And I will be that consistent, trustworthy mirror that gives you a true reflection of you, a mirror that you can trust, the only reflection that I want you to trust from here on out. And little Bronwyn, I'm so glad that we are free now and we have each other and it's a new day for us. So guys, there we go. There's the exercise, codependence. Let's undo the codependency. Let's start having healthy guilt and no more toxic guilt. Let's start having empathy for ourselves as well as for others. And let's limit that empathy when it's no longer a gift for people who are enabled by it. Let's feel our anger and let's channel it out of our bodies into boundaries and assertiveness. Thanks for listening today. Please share this episode with someone who you think could use it. And please subscribe to my podcast if you haven't already. Thanks so much, guys.